All right, there we go. All right, everybody. So again, my name is Lobo. I'm with the Oregon Brown Berets. Brown Berets of Hillsboro, Oregon. We're an autonomous Brown Beret group, and we are here for the second Rainbow Coalition book reading. We're going to start with chapter 5 today. So that being said, what I'm going to do is I am going to present my screen and then read along here. Everybody can see my screen and the words. Yes, just give me a thumbs up, and I'm looking at pictures. Cool. Okay. Appreciate that. All power to the people. All right. So I'll read along. Every now and then we might stop and talk. If anybody has any questions, comments, put it in the chat. If you'd like to speak on something, just use the raise hand feature. And with that being said, we will go ahead and get started. Interestingly enough, Brother Kwame and I were talking a while back about what me personally, what I like about his book is that how everything in the book relates to things that happen now, past, present, and maybe even if you want to think about it in the future. We just went over this big sports game, this big NFL game, Cowboys versus 49ers or something like that this weekend. And oddly enough, we're now on chapter 5 where it talks about sports in church, right? So chapter 5, not long after my mom married my stepfather, he got my brother and I heavily involved in sports. Every year since I was 8 years old, I had played in a basketball league, football league, and sometimes both, one after the other. His personal passion was coaching boys and girls basketball teams. At School 42, I remember him single-handedly making the Indianapolis Public School, IPS, basketball program stay viable. At times, he would be the coach for both teams and the referee until others eventually jumped on board to help assist him. I never saw anyone in my life as dedicated as Alonzo Dennis Hayes. All the kids at the public schools loved them some Mr. Hayes. That's how I first got the chance to meet all the best basketball players throughout Indianapolis at a young age, both boys and girls. And as I scroll down, shout out to the ones that actually help children, because there is something to be said about sports and kids and so forth, right? And helping kids and staying out of trouble and so forth. I know me myself many moons ago as a younger man, I belonged to a midnight basketball league, and it was it was late at night. It wasn't necessarily midnight. Not really too sure why they called it the midnight basketball league, uh, but it did help me kind of get out of trouble, so to speak. And of course, now I jumped a whole page and didn't mean to. So forgive me as I get my place back. But yeah, shout out to those that really do help, especially with the younger ones. It's unfortunate that sometimes in the capitalistic age that we're at, that that we have to use sports and other means as a way to get away from capitalism. It's unfortunate, but it does happen. Um, so yeah. All right. Sorry, sorry about that. I jumped out of the whole page. For those that sign in that are part of the Rainbow Coalition as well too, if and when you sign into the readings, um, should you like a copy of this PDF so that you could follow along? If you don't have a copy of Brother Kwame's book, I would reach out to Brother Kwame so that he could hook you up. All right, and there we are. We did it again. I jumped. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's pretty easy to jump. I jump it all the time.
Yeah. I'm just going to use the tab buttons. Here we go. The first basketball league I remember playing in was at the YMCA Center near the IUPUI campus downtown. Many of the guys that played in that league lived near in a nearby neighborhood that many in the streets called the campus or COC when we got older. A lot of the guys who would later become superstars in high school had started out there. That's where I first met Don Mallory. Even back then, he was one of the coldest point guards I had ever had the pleasure to play with. His game was a mixture between Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan. Not only could he rack up the scoreboard if he chose to, but he liked getting everyone involved when he was on the court, so he kept a lot of assists. He was the first guard I witnessed give no look passes like Magic and pat the ball through defenses like Allen Iverson. Those skills translated into him being probably the best point guard Ben Davis High School ever had. But it all started in those YMCA days. Don quietly had a big influence on my own basketball skills I would develop in time. RJ Williams was another older kid that started off at the YMCA with us. He was a star like Don. His game was a lot like Scottie Pippen. I'm loving these old school references. Oh my God. He was a pure scorer because he had a nice outside jumper and could take you to the hole like Pippen, too. He was a major offensive threat. On the defensive end, he was good at stealing the ball from people or helping his teammates trap the person with the ball. RJ caused a lot of turnovers that turned into fast breaks. He went on to play for Washington High School. He was one of the biggest offensive and defensive threats during his high school career. RJ was one of the biggest influences on my game, too. I could say the same thing about Tony Mays, Ronnie Yell, Tweety Bird, and my guy Tutu Daddy. Those were the first group of guys that I watched play at the YMCA and eventually got a chance to play with over the years. Not only did we all, not only did we gel on the court together, we built a lot of solid friendships off the court as well. Tutu Daddy was around the same age as me, so we became the tightest on and off the basketball court. Everybody used to Joan on Tutu because he had a big ass head, but he would always take the older dudes' jokes in strides. everybody knew everybody knew Tutu was probably the closest to Don Mallory because of our age group. Everybody loved watching him play, including me. The story goes that Tutu Daddy got his nickname from falling off one of the bleachers and hitting his head on the floor, knocking him out. That said, when Tutu woke up, barely conscious, he mumbled, "Tutu Daddy." After that, everybody started calling him Tutu Daddy. At least that's how I heard the story. It's funny how neighborhood kids and names develop. Some of us might even have those names to this day.
Mm.
My stepfather's nephew, Carl, was an upcoming coach around this time. He had been learning under the tutelage of my stepfather. He was not, he was a riot himself. He was the referee every Saturday morning at a lot of our games at the Y. If a guy had committed a traveling violation, he would blow the whistle and run down the court yelling, "My man, look, 10 quantum, my man, look, 10 quantum leaps down the court." Then he would stop and put his head down and look at us in the crowd and continue saying, "He traveled, y'all. We're going the other way." Everyone in the crowd would burst out laughing uncontrollably. He made refereeing entertaining. I learned what traveling, double dribbling, and all the basketball violations were by laughing at all of Carl's calls. From those humble beginnings, Carl went on to become one of the biggest coaches Indianapolis had ever produced. Every kid that Carl took from that YMCA league to make up his various AAU teams over the years became better players because of Carl's coaching. Tutu Daddy and I got a chance to play with Don Mallory, RJ, Tony Mays, etc., because Carl wanted his younger players to get used to playing with older and more experienced guys. We wouldn't get into the game until older guys had run up the scoreboard. However, when we did get a chance to play with them, it made us much better. Anytime Tutu and I was playing against guys our age, we would murder them on the court. We were much tougher and more confident than most of our competition from playing with the older kids. Depending upon who a kid's coach is, will greatly influence the potential that kid will come to see in themselves. Carl, hands down, was the best coach I came across that brought that out of every kind of coach. That brought out, hands down, the best coach I came across that brought that out of every kid he coached. My stepfather was second. Moving our family out of the suburbs caused my stepfather to want to give us a balanced view of ourselves as black kids growing up. I didn't realize all the lessons he was trying to teach me about life at the time by forcing us to never forget where we came from. But I gave him a lot of credit for not instilling a quote unquote black middle class mindset in me. I think he saw the limitations of that just like he observed the limitations of a person having just a quote unquote black urban upbringing. I remember him telling me and my brother one of the reasons why he was going to enroll us in to the Atkins Boys Club was because he didn't want us to forget where we came from. It's very wise. Atkins Boys Club resided on the west side of Indianapolis in the Hoville area. At the time, Hoville was probably one of the toughest neighborhoods besides Brightwood out east. And if I mispronounce that, Brother Kwame, let me know. If we weren't on the sidelines at an IPS basketball game somewhere, my brother and
I would
I were
say
at the
I would say Hallville, just in case the Hallville people is listening.
I was just gonna say somebody's gonna be like, this
They
cat
gonna be
wrote this
like
book.
Hallville,
Yeah.
Hallville.
No, no.
Hogville. Okay.
Yeah, Hallville.
Hogville. Okay. Duly noted. Duly noted. Atkins Boys Club resided on the west side of Indianapolis in the Hogville area. At the time, Hogville was probably one of the two roughest neighborhoods besides Brightwood out east. If we weren't on the sidelines at an IPS basketball game somewhere, my brother and I were at the boys' club after school ended. Most of the time, he would drop us off for football practice whenever football season came back around. I loved football, so I came to love going to the boys' club after school. It gave me a chance to practice and kick it with my closest friends, my closest childhood friends that I came to have outside my neighborhood. That's where my relationship with Anton Harris really developed. He and I initially met when we were in second grade together at School 42. We had both been in Miss Wynn's class and had a thing for Tiffany Duncan. She ended up being his girlfriend in the end, but I respected the fact that she chose him since he was my guy. Man, that is classic. There's nothing like those old school homeboy values. The boys' club is where many of the lifetime friendships and even gang cliques were first formed and developed. Most of us hung out together because we were involved in sports or on the same team together. Anton and I were on several basketball and football teams while we attended Atkins up until the time we turned 12. There were two games that stand out in my mind. One was a basketball game, and the other was our last football game together. Big Larry had been Big Larry had been our basketball coach this particular season. Everybody knew and liked Big Larry. He was a light-skinned, heavyset brother who wore an afro and walked with an exaggerated limp since one of his legs was slightly shorter than the other. He and a guy by the name of Porky oversaw the boys' club while also acting as our coaches, depending upon the league and age group we were in. I don't remember which boys' club we were playing, but I just remember me hitting my first three-pointer and the crowd went wild. After that, Big Larry helped three fingers down alongside his little leg, signifying that he wanted me to shoot another three-pointer. I remember me dribbling the ball down the court, and as soon as I got a clear shot again, I knocked down my second three-pointer of the game. If I'm not mistaken, this all occurred in the second quarter. Every time one of my teammates passed me the ball from out of bounds, I would look over at Big Larry, and he would be holding three fingers alongside his short leg. I ended up hitting five three-pointers in a row, ending the game with 28 points. From that day forth, I was considered one of the guys who had a nice basketball game at the club. I'm not sure how many points Anton had that particular game, but he and I would usually be the two highest scorers every game. The other highlight of my Atkins boys career was when we had played the Steelers in the Super Bowl at Crispus Attucks Junior High School. Years later, they would turn that school back into a high school, but at this particular time, it was still a junior high school. This was the last game our football team would ever play together again. Mr. Williams had been our coach ever since we hit 10 years of age, I think. Before that, most of us played for Big Larry, who coached the little team at the club. Mr. Williams' son, Corbett, was our quarterback. He played a lot like Randall Cunningham, running a lot of quarterback sweeps. Anton Harris played running back. He was hard to handle like Bo Jackson, Brennan Metcalf, like Bo Jackson. Brennan Metcalf was our running back. He was our Marcus Allen. I was one of our wide receivers. We all played defense too, except Corbett. We made a mean defense. Big Mark Zachary played like a young Reggie White. When he would tackle you, he would make you suck wind. Then we had Big Kendrick Shelton, who played a center on offense and was one of our linemen on defense. He reminded me of a young William Perry. Forrest Clemens was our other hard hitter, like Lawrence Taylor. I had always played cornerback myself. Even though I was a really skinny kid, I think I actually was better in football because of how aggressive and fearless I was. I was the Richard Sherman type of quarterback, you can say. Nevertheless, the game against the Steelers was comparable to the England Patriots when Tom Brady had played for them and the Indianapolis Colts, when either Peyton Manning or Andrew Luck was still killing it. They were our main opponents. We tried to beat every time we played them during the regular season. We were so competitive against each other. I recall them fighting us after one game because they had lost. We beat them up on the football field too. All of our games had been intense against them. This last Super Bowl was for the history books since it would be the last time we would play in this league for our respective boys club. I think the fact that Wheeler's boy club resided on the east side and ours on the west side played a big factor as well. Before I continue, I'm going to look to the audience and see if anybody else wants to continue to read. And as I'm looking for hands up, if somebody else wants to read, again, making references past, present, and future. It's cool because growing up in Texas, Veronica can tell you, football is a religion there. It is legit a religion. You have, things like Friday Night Lights and all that. And I can remember growing up and just despising it because of my size. I always had to play it. Fast forward until, the whole issue with Colin Kaepernick. I now no longer watch football, for my own political reasons, but it's cool to have some of these old school references in there. Does anybody want to read?
I'll pick it up.
Okay, go for it, Rafi, and then I'll scroll for you.
Okay. This game ended up being a defensive game. No matter how hard each side tried, neither side scored a touchdown. The first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, nor the last quarter, because of what we went to overtime. The ball was placed on the 10-yard line. Each side was given 4 downs to score. We ended up getting the ball first due to a missed snap and losing a lot of yards on the running plays. By the time we got on the 4th down, we were all back or all the back of the 40-yard line. So we're on the back. Only a player could save us. We rarely ever passed the ball. A little league game. I remember only a few times ever passing the ball. You could practically count on every play being a running play. Before this game, though, we practiced this one pass play that we call the hair special, just like a flea flicker in the NFL. The quarterback and the running back would line up in the backfield. The quarterback would be in the shotgun position when the ball was hiked to him. When he got the hike, he would start acting like he was going to do a quarterback sweep. But as soon as the defense started to head towards him, he would turn around to his running back standing in the backfield and toss it to him. Well, that was what we did. When Corbett tossed it to Anton, it was almost all in the way it went down the field, wide open. Wait, I think I was around the 20-yard line when I caught the ball. As soon as I caught it, their cornerback, who was running fast towards me as the ball was in the air, dived at my feet. I shook him off with a little effort and ran the rest of the way to score the first and only touchdown I scored in my life. You should have seen the crowd erupt. All our parents were in the stands going, wow. My own teammates rushed up to me and gave me 1,000 slaps on the back of the helmet. Since nobody ever kicked extra points, in little league, we lined up for 2-point conversion. I think we ran a play for Anton. After having a hard time the whole game running the ball, Anton easily crossed the zone and to the end zone to score for us. The crowd went crazy. It was clear to everyone that we were going to win now. When the Steelers lined up on the 10-yard line to get their 4 downs to tie us, we were ready and salivating at the mouth. They had running back that played like Jerome Bettis. I never found out what his name was, but we already knew they were going to give him the ball. And sure enough, on the very first play, they gave him the ball, and he ran up to the middle, breaking several tackles to score their touchdown. As elated as we were just to play before, our morale dropped to the opposite extreme. We couldn't believe it. The score was now 8-6, and they had a chance to tie us. The referee had already informed both teams that if the game ended up being a tie after both teams were given 4 downs, then the Super Bowl would end in a tie. We didn't want to end like that, or end like that though. We wanted to have the bragging rights of being the Super Bowl champions. For many of us, this would be our first game to ever play in this league. When both sides lined up with the Steelers, 2-point conversion, you could feel the tension in the air. Everybody in the audience was sitting on the edge of their seats. Down, the quarterback yelled, set, hut 1, hut 2. Their quarterback handed off to their fullback who had just scored the previous play, but we were ready for him this time. It was as if our whole defense had honed on him because we stampeded through their defense and tackled him behind the line of scrimmage. The game was over. We were the Super Bowl champions. Want me to keep going or
Go for it. Why don't you do one more paragraph, Ralphie, and then I'll take over.
okay? Sports kept me focused, disciplined, and gave me a sense of belonging to a group that gave me meaning, no matter if I was playing for Atkins Boys Club, Municipal Garden in the Riverside Park League on the AAU teams for my stepfather or cousin Carl. It gave me an opportunity to meet and establish relationships with all the best basketball players throughout Indianapolis, who ended up influencing my own basketball game. Of all the great basketball players I had the pleasure to grow up either watching or playing against, Mosey Barnes was the biggest influence on my game. He was only 1 year or 2 older than me, but was far ahead of all his peers. He was so cold that if you didn't get his game by halftime, the second half, he may be on the bench because he had scored out. That's how they play. They had it set up in the Municipal Gardens Basketball League. My father sometimes would literally walk all the way from the east side of Indianapolis to the west side to watch my brother and I play those games. Out of all the female basketball players that played for my stepfather, Sherry Dawson was hands down the best. If they would have had a WNBA when she was playing, there's no question in my mind she would have been another Cheryl Swoops. I can't say she influenced my game personally, but she and other young women that played for my dad's AAU teams were so good. I knew women could be just as entertaining as a man. I had a lot of respect for those women. It's a shame that they waited so long to develop the WNBA for them.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Rafa. I'll go ahead and take over from there. And then, interesting, again, just me being a man and being involved in sports, I never even knew the history of the WNBA and how new it was. Like, I thought it was always a thing. So again, it's good for me to be educated in that, because when I read this part, I remember researching like, well, when was the WNBA founded? Like, pro basketball, I think, goes back from the 40s or 50s, and NFL, for football, it's got to be around that same time too. So, yeah, it's good to always be educated on that and be mindful of that. From the time I was 8 years old until the time I was in high school, I was involved in sports all year round. Some years I would play basketball, football, and baseball. My uncle Bobby had been one of my baseball coaches when we played in the Peace Games in Canada one year. But most years it was just football and basketball. Uh-oh. Sorry about that. Then during our summer breaks, my parents would all chip in to send my brother and I to play at the Purdue basketball camp in Lafayette, Indiana. We look forward to that every summer. It gave my brother and I a chance to feel grown by staying on the campus in our own dorm room for a week as we competed with some of the best players around the state. That's kind of cool. Every summer, we would return from the camp reinvigorated with trophies that made us believe even more so in our own potential. You couldn't tell me or my brother that we wouldn't one day at least play for our favorite college basketball team. Mine's Michigan Wolverines, or in my brother's case, for the Chicago Bulls. We were both driven and committed to our hoop dreams. Besides sports, church played a big influence on my formative years. As far back as I can remember, my parents always took us to several churches, several to, always took us to church several times a week. We started off at Christ Church on the north side of Indianapolis. I don't remember too much back then, but I do remember going to church and being enthralled by the saints who would catch the Holy Ghost and would start shouting and speaking in tongues. It was very amusing to me and my brother anytime we witnessed that. All of a sudden, the women in the church would start running up and down the aisle, screaming during one of the songs that the church would be singing. On cue, the piano person would switch to shouting music, and other women would all of a sudden catch the Holy Ghost too. Hallelujah, they would scream over and over. Thank you, Jesus. Every Sunday, it seemed like some of the same women would catch the Holy Ghost every time. My brother and I would sit back in amazement as it overtook them like a plague, one by one. I was especially amused by the ones who would fall out, and the ushers would have to run up to them and place coats over their dresses. I always used to wonder what it was like to catch the Holy Ghost. I imagine it being a spiritual experience like no other. When we started attending Jesus is Lord Christian Fellowship, my brother and I were probably around 7 and 5. It was a church that ran out of the pastor's house on the north side of Indianapolis. They eventually converted the garage into the main part of the church as the church membership began to grow. Because it was a smaller church, it had a very warm, extended family type of vibe to it. Everyone knew everyone else by their first names. Many of the same things I had witnessed at Christ Church, such as people shouting and speaking in tongues, went on there too. Pastor Jerome Daring became like a paternal father figure to us all. I remember feeling like God himself was leading us through this ministry. In time, I would honor any and everything he would tell the congregation. Of all his teachings, the sermons about the rapture and the end times influenced my world outlook the most. He would tell us that Jesus would be coming back in the second coming to take his true saints to heaven with him. And if we weren't right when he came back, we would be forced to go through the quote unquote, the tribulations. The tribulations would be when the Antichrist would rise to power and reign upon the earth. He told us that he would reign for 7 years and force everyone on earth to accept the mark of the beast, which was 666. No one could buy or sell anything unless you had the mark of the beast. However, if you accepted it, you would be forever damned to hell. His message to the saints centered upon this teaching. Sometimes we would go to church on a Friday and watch movies about the rapture. Every time I would leave feeling scared and terrified about what was going to befall mankind. That made an indelible mark upon me, my brother and sister. I often felt as if I would be one of the ones who would be left behind when Jesus came back. It became such an omnipresent feeling that I remember repenting sometimes several times in any given hour. It played a big role on my siblings too, because anytime it would storm hard outside, we would all call my mother or grandmother just to make sure Jesus hadn't come back to take the saints away. Our mother and grandmother were like Moses to us. There was no question in our minds that they would be going to heaven when the rapture took place. This caused me to suffer from a lot of anxiety and feelings of hopelessness growing up. My siblings and I would often discuss how messed up life was to have to endure such a state of affairs. I remember around this time in my life wrestling with a lot of us, self-hate, and wishing I had never been born, especially when I turned 12. We were told that 12 was the age of accountability, so to speak, quote unquote, meaning that you were old enough to be held fully accountable for your life as any adult would be. As much as I grew to hate being alive, I knew there was nothing I could do to change the fact that I was and would now have to be accountable for it. It was around this time that I swore I would never have any kids myself. I figured that would be the cruelest thing to do to a child, force him to live in a world that seemed destined to fail and was rigged against mankind. I felt the chances of me making it to heaven was close to slim to none. Very interesting. I myself actually waited until my 30s to have children, and now that I'm almost in my 50s, I'm second guessing that with teenagers already. It was like living to be forever damned. Every part of my existence seemed sinful to me. Simply thinking about sinful things and having to repent for such thoughts every day seemed to preoccupy my waking consciousness. Every day I felt like a living hell that I was trapped within. Mm. As much as I hated life around this time in my life and truly hated going to church, the church family was my anchor paradoxically. Up until the time I was about 13, I would attend children's church every Sunday. The pastor's wife, Sister Tony, taught that. She became like a second mother to me. I loved the warm, motherly disposition that she exuded. The way she explained the Bible stories to us made them more understandable and tangible to our present day lives. I always had been an inquisitive person, so having her explain things in the Bible to us made me feel a lot more at ease listening to her. Sometimes we wouldn't be able to answer our, sometimes she wouldn't be able to answer our questions directly and simply would say that the Lord works in mysterious ways. But most of the time, she tried to give us an explanation that we could understand. That was very different from how it was when I attend my grandmother Nana's church. They would tell us if we didn't get baptized, we would go to hell. No questions asked. At my grandmother's church, the women weren't allowed to wear makeup or pants. I often wondered which teaching of the Bible was actually correct. We refer to our denomination as non-denominational at Pastor Jerome's church, whereas Nana's church taught the Jesus only doctrine. They believed that Jesus was God made flesh to save mankind. On the other hand, at my mom's church, they taught the Holy Trinity doctrine, that Jesus, God, and the Holy Ghost were three entities that worked as a team to save mankind. Because I had come to view Pastor Jerome as my spiritual leader, I had accepted his version of the Bible. Not only did it seem more correct to me, but I think I also embraced it because God seemed like a more forgiving God than the one that the Jesus only Christians taught. There seemed to be a lot more rules and regulations in that sect of Christianity. And I wanted to believe that we had embraced the true representation of Christianity. Nevertheless, my siblings and I all felt that Nana would go to heaven too because of her dedication to the word. So a lot of things she would tell us and we would listen to and reluctantly accept as long as it occurred with what Pastor Jerome had told us. One of the things I used to hate most about church was fasting. I remember my siblings and I would go home and hide a box of crackers in our bedroom closet whenever the pastor announced on Sunday that we would be fasting throughout the week. Anytime we weren't praying and reading the Bible, we would sneak off once or twice and eat a snack of a sleeve of crackers in the closet together. Before we left our room, we would check each other's mouths to make sure there was no visible evidence of breaking the fast early. It was stuff like that that made me feel like I was going to hell when I died. I felt like I was leading my siblings down the wrong path. But then again, many things we did unanimously. I think we all felt torn by the cosmic dilemma we were placed in to be forced to live in a world that was damned by God Himself, yet one that we often felt was unfair and disturbing to say the least. Beyond the fear and omnipresent sense that the end of the world was near, we loved our church family. We weren't allowed to celebrate Halloween most of my youth, so we would attend the fall festival with our church family. Instead of going trick or treating, the church would give all the kids and teenagers food and candy. I remember they had built a fire pit one fall festival where we went outside and roasted hot dogs and marshmallows. It was like times it was times like that that made me feel protected from the evil carnal that played a big influence on my consciousness and development. It was as if there were two worlds that were fighting for my soul around this time in my life. The one that existed in school, around my peers, during sports I played, and in all the social groups I circulated outside of church, and the church and everything that revolved around my faith. But of these worlds sat on opposite sides of my shoulders, guiding my consciousness in contradictory ways, while the angel on one shoulder made me feel eternally incomplete and sinful by the very nature. The devil on my opposite shoulder rejected this paradigm and made me feel that the worldly life was more natural and true to my nature. This internal struggle became the basis of my cognitive dissonance. It was a contradiction that I had never discovered in a suitable way to mitigate and compartmentalize. In fact, the older I got, this tension became more and more exacerbated, leading to an increased disdain for life. As much as I wanted to end this inner turmoil, that seemed to stalk my being and existence at every single turn. I didn't feel there was any adequate solution, but to play out this cruel game called life. Interesting, very interesting. And so that's it. There's chapter 5. I'm going to keep chapter 6 up right here. We're going to pause for a quick second. It's very interesting to read. Brother Kwame mentioned how he felt about church stuff. Being born and raised, Rafa can probably attest to this, probably Vanessa too. Being born and raised as Chicanos, Mexican Americans, especially in the part of Texas where I came from in El Paso, they were very strict Roman Catholics. I remember, when is it when you know we meet on Fridays? Is that Lent or something like that? I remember we weren't allowed to eat meat on certain days. And I remember thinking that's just the most dumb thing I ever heard. Like, if you're starving, if people are starving, they should be able to eat. Isn't that what Jesus did? Didn't he feed a bunch of people with like one little fish and it fed like thousands? And I'm pretty sure he didn't say, oh, but this is Friday. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't make sense to me. Um, and with a little bit of medical and mental health, behavioral health background that I have, I can actually see how it could be somewhat traumatizing if it's not done correctly or explained correctly to a child. It's quite interesting. Um, Fast forward to my life now, you know, within my own Brown Beret unit, we have somebody that's Roman Catholic. We have somebody that's does the old indigenous ways of praying to multiple deities. Me, I'm kind of somewhere in between. Then we have others that are atheists, and we actually have a recruit that is Hindu or Hinduist or something like that. And we've all come to understand that there is a little bit of that little bit of trauma, right? My problem is I like to read books, and I've understood the Spanish Inquisition and what was called La Encomienda system, where Spanish monks and Spanish friars would enslave thousands of indigenous. So there's always that in the back of my head. But you know, just a few years ago, we did a day labor jacket drive, and one of our biggest donors was a non-denominational Spanish-speaking church, and they actually gave us space to hold uh, meetings and equipment and stuff. So You know, it's an interesting paradigm there. Okay, I am going to mute myself because I've been doing a lot of talking, and I'd like to hear from you guys. Who has something to say about especially this part of the book, how it impacted them? If y'all could raise your hand so I could see you. And then when I call you out, just unmute and let's talk. Sister Veronica, go ahead.
Okay, so all right. So first off, just real quickly, is I find it interesting how we went from sports to religion. That was interesting to me. It was like all of a sudden we were talking about religion. So I would love to hear a little bit more from Brother Kwame on that. Like, you know, what was it that kind of tied those things together for you to put it, you know, all in one chapter? Because I'm sure there's some, you know, some thought to that. But so I don't know, Brother Kwame, do you want to kind of interject on that? And then I just have one other comment after that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought sports and religion like had very, very big influences on my life that was resembles two different aspects of who I was developing into. I had my hoop dreams that played a big role in my life. Like I said, my stepfather, he was one of the biggest coaches, and my cousin was one of the biggest coaches that was known by a lot of people in Indianapolis. Like, you go to the West Side and you say Mr. Hayes, everybody be like, yeah, everybody knows Mr. Hayes. You know what I mean? He passed a couple years ago, back in 2020, but everybody knows him in Indianapolis, especially on the West Side, even on the East Side. So that played a big factor in my life because, like, I spent many hours of the day practicing basketball, football. Like, a lot of kids grow up in this society. Like, that's one of the two options that we're given, is like doing these sports. You know what I mean? Basketball and football. And it plays such a big impact on a lot of Black kids growing up in these different neighborhoods and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so I wanted to put that influence on my in there, because you can't understand me if you don't understand how much sports played a role in my development, like building relationships with people in the community. Why I knew certain people in the community and didn't know other people in the community. Like, I knew all the basketball players, all the and that's for boys and girls. You dig what I'm saying? I knew all these individuals before they became superstars and went to play in college, and some of them even, I want to say, NBA. Like, I knew Bonzi Will. I didn't know him personally, but I saw him in high school play and already knew what type of player he was gonna be by the time he went to college and then went to the NBA. You know what I mean? So that played such a big role in my life. But the other big role was the religion. Like, religion played, I came up in a religious, I would call religious fundamentalist household. And I don't think a lot of people understand what that type of upbringing is like. You know what I mean? We hear the positive, and this is not any disrespect to anybody on here, but I'm speaking about my life. You know what I mean? This what how religion impacted me. And it wasn't a positive way. You know what I'm saying? I internalized, as y'all see, a lot of function because of it. For me, how I analyze it today, it was part of my colonial indoctrination. You know what I'm saying? Of self-hate. You know what I'm saying? Of how it was given to us and stuff. You know what I mean? And you really can't even understand why I became the person I did later in life and got into criminality. Like, sometimes my mom, she don't listen. You know what I mean? She's never read my book. So she don't even understand like how my upbringing influenced me. But as you can see, I had a disdain from life because of how religion made me feel. This was the only purpose in life was about going to heaven and hell and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And I always thought that was like meaningless. Like me, and my brother and sister, all of us felt that way. You know what I'm saying? We didn't see why people thought that was somehow something to look forward to. Even the way the pastor used to talk about heaven. He at church, he'd be like, well, when we get to heaven, we're gonna be going to church all day. And I was like, what? I don't even like going to church right now. Like, so I don't even want to go to heaven and I don't want to go to hell. You know what I'm saying? It's like, what the fuck is this life is about? If this is all life is about to me, this is meaningless. Like, I don't even want to live. You know what I'm saying? And this what took me in dark areas in my mind for a long time throughout my life when I really believed that stuff. And and like I said, if my mom really understood, like that's one reason why it made me easy to turn to crime, because I didn't care about my life. So I could do the most reckless stuff with my life. And when I got out of prison, I used to tell a lot of people from the streets that looked up to me, that looked up to what I used to do back in then. I was like, nah, man, don't glorify that person, because that person really had a disdain for life. That's why I came off so fearless and reckless, where I could just rob anybody, rob businesses, get in shootouts with the police. I didn't care if I was gonna die. You know what I'm saying? It was like it was my way to purge and the cathartic hate for myself I could do to my community. You know what I'm saying? So I was driven by a lot of anger and bitterness and hate, but it came from that indoctrination. You know what I'm saying? Because I didn't really feel no real meaning in life. Like I did once I started to learn those teachings and stuff from my mom, my grandmother, and stuff like that. It made me just like, man, feel like I hate this world. You know what I'm saying? That's why I said in there, I didn't even want no kids, because I was like, I'm not gonna bring nobody in no world like this. If this is all this is about, going to heaven and hell and stuff like this, I'm not gonna bring my kids into this. You know what I'm saying? So that was something I had to put in there, because you see, I struggled with this throughout my life, my whole life, until I got a resolution on it. And prison really, unfortunately, was the only opportunity I had to even look into the subject. And I don't want to give up how I resolve this issue later on, because I don't have them feelings now. You know what I'm saying? I don't have those cognitive dissonance and stuff, but that was only because I started educating myself about everything. I was like, nobody's not gonna ever lie to me ever again, not even my parents. You know what I'm saying? So that's how I eventually resolved that. But I put those both influences in there because I feel like sports influenced myself on a positive tip, but religion influenced me on a negative way. And people don't understand. We only hear the stories, a positive story about religion. We don't hear the stories about people like me. And I've been across a lot of people like me that religion played a negative role, and you can't even understand why they did the stuff in their life if you don't understand how that traumatized them. You know what I'm saying? That was a real PTSD that I struggled with for a long time in my life. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I put both of those in there. Like I said, ain't no disrespect to anybody over here that's religion, Christian, Muslim, Jew, whatever you believe in, but this is my story. And this how this affected me. And you can't understand me if you don't understand how that impacted me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I appreciate that, brother. I really do. So for myself, I have lots to say as well about the religious experience in that. So because I have so much to say about that, I actually chose to focus on the first part of your chapter here and look at the sports aspect of it. So we had started off previous to starting the study group just on, side chat, talking about, how, people are focused on sports so much and things like that. You know, we have the playoffs going on right now, and you know, people just really like it. I mean, it's a religion for some people, you know, like Lobo was saying, you know, out here in Texas, and I'm sure, you know, other states as well. It's like, you know, that's just it. It's sports year round, you know. But so I wanted to kind of give a kind of different perspective to this with the sport. So we have in most sports an offense and a defense, right? Um, and you have both of them for a reason. You know, they both play a role. And at one point, you may be on the offense, and at a different point in the game, you may be on the other side, right? Both of them are important. You really won't have a game without the other. So, you know, I kind of look at this from a dialectical perspective of we have these two opposing sides, but yet you can't have one without the other. And so, you know, when you analyze sports, I mean, you understand that with dialectics, everything, there's contradictions in everything, right? So we have it in sports and we have it everywhere else, you know. So when we look at sports and you look at the defense, you're looking at, you know, the trying to keep the opposing side from scoring, right? And so that's like the main function. And then you have the offense who is trying to score or advance the ball. And so when we look at, you know, the struggle, it's the same thing. We got to have both aspects of that. At times we may be on the defense, other times we may be on the offense. But you know, one of the biggest lessons for me here, since I started looking at dialectics, is that you know, so many times as oppressed people, we stay on the defense, you know, and we're just waiting for the next hit. And trying to preserve ourselves and trying to conserve ourselves, which there's nothing wrong in that. Most of us probably wouldn't be here if we didn't, you know, have that mindset. But we also cannot negate the importance of being on the offense, you know. So we're not trying to advance a ball, but we're trying to advance the movement. And so, you know, I just kind of wanted to give that kind of analysis because, you know, we have the defense and the offense, and we have it in sports, we have it in the military standpoint, we have it in the so-called justice system, you know, where they will afford you defense counsel if you cannot afford one. You know, may not be the best, we all know about that, that's a different conversation, but nonetheless it is afforded to you because we understand that everybody should have that, right? But when it comes down to the struggle, to opposing racism, the violence that is inflicted on us, the class struggle, it all of a sudden it takes this different connotation and it's negative. You a troublemaker, you're a terrorist, you know, the word that they used during the Trump era, you're non-patriotic, you know, all these negative things. And you know, I think of you know, Malcolm X when he said to be given the rights of a human being is everything. You know, we want to be, I am a man, I want to be treated like a human being, and it is a human right to fight for that and to bring that into existence by any means necessary. And with that, I yield.
That's dope. That was really dope because you are
Yeah, very
100%
powerful.
right. Yeah, very powerful. Brother Shamako, you have your hand up. You're next, and then my comrade sister Anna was next after Brother Shamako.
Sister.
You're coming in and out.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
All right.
I can.
Yeah, so I just said you can go ahead and go. I'm still sort of processing, especially after but Sister Rose just dropped. So go ahead.
All right. Okay. Sister Anna, you're up next, comrade.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everybody's view concerning sports and church. And one thing that I could take away from this chapter is that both provide a form of community activity that brings the community together. Matter of fact, living in a barrio in Nueva York, New York, those was the two things that kept the children off the street, away from gun violence, which every week, our community will face, the loss of a 5-year-old or a 12-year-old who lost his or her life behind gun violence, behind a upsurging of gangs. And the parents or the elders in the community will try to keep the community together by introducing, the children or the family to a church setting or have a recreational activity going on. And I must say that my father, he was a community activist in which he was devastated when he heard the news about a young child of one of the kids that he taught in grade school who lost his or her life. So he made a stand to form a softball team, to form a basketball team. So this way, the kids will be safeguarded from these elements, And although some people feel that it's really putting, not allowing a child to make an independent decision, again, is something that has saved their lives. Even when it came to church, when I was young, I did not want to go to church every Sunday with my grandmother. But then again, it kept us out of trouble from El Barrio living in Harlem, and which, we would be bored out of our minds, because the only thing I could say that was so entertaining about church is hearing my great grand aunt sing, and she had a voice like Mahalia Jackson, and she could move your heart. And I, would stand up, but when you have the woman coming down the aisle like they were possessed, that had terrorized the hell out of me, had every child screaming, every child hollering. But then again, it just kept the family together. It kept the kids away from the the street where heroin was so intimate. It was destroying the family. Every week, somebody's just in a zombie state, or they laid out, or people being robbed. But I just want to add to that, back to the community activities, it just brings so much of what my father did to save the community, where, he either gather a lot of people to help fight against the manager of our complex, which was TAP Project, and find out that everybody was so intimidated to stand against them and feel that it would infect their rent by, having such a program that really was the light of our whole community, that my father had to, fight and rally and protest by himself, and even get a whole housing department of police who used to change their clothes in our building in the basement. He got them out of there and turned that area into a community center where it was safe for the kids to leave school and come straight there after school. And it helped again with daycare. It helped again with saving the lives of our children, which had always been a big thing to my dad. And also made him known in the community as a strong community activist. Because I tell you, my father wasn't fighting, he was cursing someone out. And every weekend, I know that my dad wasn't home because he was in jail, you know? So I appreciate, you know, what Brother Kwame has spoke about, these two different activities that meant so much in my life growing up in East Harlem. Black power.
Thank you, comrade. Okay, brother Shamako, have you gathered your thoughts? What do you have to say on this?
Yeah, I tried, so I'm gonna I'm gonna go with what I got. I mean, there's a lot there, man, and you know, it's funny. So I definitely related to both of those. Um, you know, I played football, soccer, basketball, and baseball, and religion wise, uh, between ages 11 and 15, you guys will appreciate this. I went from being an atheist to a Christian to being in the Nation of Islam to being a Sunni Muslim to being in the occult to being New Age. I don't know if I got the order right, but like I was like, I think a couple of weeks away from getting my ex, so I almost got my ex, and there was a whole situation where my neighborhood brought me into the nation, his sister and her so my neighbor brought me into the nation. He lived with his sister and her dude, brother Rob. And brother Rob was like real intense. He was like he was like the kind of dude, like, you know, you'd be in a car with him on the way to like a training, and he would be like sometimes I just sit in the bathroom and look in the mirror trying to make myself sweat mentally, you know, like, and he wasn't exaggerating. He really did just sit in the bathroom and try to make himself sweat. I don't know why you would do that, but you know, they ended up getting into a fight, and the pastor came over and they both got kicked out, and it was a weird mess. And anyway, so I ended up leaving the nation, but you know, I had a lot of positive experiences in religion and sports, and I had a lot of negative experiences in religion and sports. Which I'm not going to probably spend the night thinking about that. So thank you, Kwame, for that memory lane, which I did not plan on going on tonight. But and you know, when I think about it, it's so, you know, when I got to high school, that's funny. When I got to high school, I actually stopped playing sports and stopped participating in religion, and my thing became hip hop, which is how that was. So I don't know if that's like another thing I'd probably throw in there. Especially like today, you see a lot of like hip hop youth programs, you know, dancing programs, and they teach your kids how to rap and stuff. And that was actually a big part of how I even got involved in the movement, was like teaching kids like rap and like how to rap and like the history of hip hop and all that stuff. But it's so like right now, like so I'm a Christian right now, and it's not because anybody ministered to me, or I went through some spiritual stuff that landed me at the Bible. That's the best way I can put it. And this was like a couple of weeks prior to that, I would have considered myself a shaman, which I would not consider myself now. And you know, I'm still in the movement, and I still understand history, and it kind of hurts my heart a little bit, like as I come to understand the Bible as an adult and understand how it's taught and implemented in the United States and its relationship to oppression. And I think about like the person that is Jesus, and like how he would take that, or how he takes it, like how he takes it. You know what I mean? And I'm not trying to turn this into a religious discussion, but just to Kwame's point, I couldn't imagine him being in the room and hearing that and like his heart not breaking into a million pieces. And you know, it's real. Like it's all rules and punishment and fire, and like none of the and you know, like we had that conversation about the trauma of Black and brown people in the United States, and unfortunately, there's no separating right now. There's no separating Christianity from that history, and America hasn't even apologized really for slavery, which it used the Bible to implement. So it's that whole thing is just like a political, spiritual mess that's still not. You know, it's funny because sometimes I talk to Christians, and particularly ones that are really on the right wing, and I'm like, you know, if you believe in the Bible, there's no way possible that you can't think that America's not swimming in demons. Like it's just generating them by virtue of a lie it perpetuates with its own existence. Like we're sitting on a giant theft built on murder and bloodshed. Like there's no way that's cool. No way. Anyway, I will say I regret I quit sports in high school and I regret that. I actually I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I wish I kept playing baseball and I wish I kept playing football, at least now. Just on the basis of the camaraderie of it, and that I was actually pretty good at it. And I just didn't like some of my coaches and some of my the people I played with. But anyway, I'm just rambling. Pass.
No, thank you. Thank you for your input. You know what's interesting that correlates directly with this book is timing and knowledge. What's interesting is most of my life after my formative years as a preteen and growing up very, very strict Roman Catholic, and men that are Mexican or Chicano men have to wear cowboy hats and Stetson cologne and cowboy boots and go to the Roman Catholic church every Sunday or whatever. After I left Texas, I slowly started decolonizing. And for many, many years, I almost despise Christianity. I've read and I'm thankful that I'm able to read in a couple of languages. So once I learned about the encomienda system and how my last name probably isn't Castillo, it's probably something indigenous that I can't even pronounce that I won't know because a Spanish monk, friar, conquistador changed it for me and my people. It was hard to come to terms. What's interesting is just recently, me personally, on a different side of my family that are very, very deep South Americans, almost Caribbean, they almost kind of bring together the two is what I'm learning. The assumption about some socialistic countries is that they are poor and they don't know anything, and that's the furthest from the truth. Brother Rafa can tell you that Cubans read everything. Their literacy rate is 100%, if not in the 90% top percentile. I remember that's one of the things that um, Cuban communists and socialists wanted to change was the literacy rate. In one side of my family that aren't Chicanos, that are Venezolanos, like from Venezuela, one thing they wanted to change was health, just overall health, right? And what's interesting is this past weekend, I don't remember what game, something about the Playoffs, Cowboys or 49ers. I don't remember. I remember I was getting really annoyed because it was everywhere. I was running errands. I'd grabbed a bite to eat somewhere and it was on the TVs there, like in the bars, whatever. I was like, God, annoying. I'm getting gas. I'm running to pay for my gas. The clerk, he's got it in the radio. I'm like, man, this is like propaganda. I can't get away from this shit, right? And I got home and I'm flipping through the channels as I'm getting dressed to go to job number 2. And I remember something caught my attention, and there was a really cool video that was black and white. And of course, it showed people crossing the Rio Grande. It showed a lot of Native Americans. And it said something like, gosh, if I could kind of paraphrase, it said something like, if you're a stranger in a foreign land, you should reach out to people if you're like from there and you see that they're strangers in a foreign land and give them something. If you don't want to be judged. You shouldn't be judged. And I remember looking at that like, what? And at the very end, it had a rather indigenous looking, South American indigenous looking young lady carrying her baby. And it said, Jesus was a refugee. He gets it. He gets us. And I was like, God damn, that's fucking dope. Yeah, he was. And then I remember thinking, yeah, but I just like, I know the history and this and that. Fast forward, talking to some of my South American relatives, they still keep the old ways. They'll burn traditional herbs, whatever. They do whatever kind of ceremonies, and then they go off and pray the rosary. And that to me is odd. Whereas some Northern Nation people, specifically like Mexicans or whatever, it's either one of the two that I've noticed. You're either Catholic or Christian or indigenous. And in my experience, I've never ever seen any mixture of that. And to them, as South American socialists, they're very open to that. So much so that I made a comment, and one of my tias, which is like an elder auntie, said something. And she said, well, and I'll translate in English. She said, well, you like to read, right? Or you watch documentaries, right? And I go, yeah. She goes, well, instead of always crapping on us, meaning Christian, or crapping on Catholics, you should research who Bartolome de las Casas was. And so I was like, yeah, okay, Tia. And that older generation, you don't really say anything. But in the back of my mind, I was like, yeah, you really colonized. Okay, whatever. And I remember thinking that's such a weird name. De las Casas is a Spanish name. That's common, but Bar Bartolome, whatever. I've been doing research. He was one of the very few Spanish friars that came with the conquistadors that was like, this is not the way that I don't think Jesus would be doing it. No, we need to put a change to this. And of course, they took him out. And I didn't know that. And I have a collegiate level American education, and my 75-year-old socialistic auntie in Maracaibo, Venezuela, who never graduated high school, knew that. And she schooled me. And so it's very interesting because now I'm not saying I'm making a full 360, but there's got to be some common ground in regards to what Brother Shamako was saying about, and being involved with the nation. One of my most favorite pictures is a picture to me that represents strength and black and brown unity. And it also represents to me strength and religious unity too. There is a picture, and Rashid and Rafa may correct me on whom this unit was. I think there were a bunch of hermanas, a bunch of brown sisters from the East LA Brown Berets, but they all women did security for a Black Lives Matter event that the FOI was holding. And it's this great picture. You see all these brown beret mujeres and all these brown beret mujeres, and then you have the FOI soldiers with their neckties. And I love that picture. That to me speaks volumes on religious unity, black and brown unity, and somewhere in that middle is the demon of capitalism, right? Brother Kwame, you got your hand up. Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah. I like this conversation. This is a very healthy conversation. This part of my book was just speaking about the negative. But when I get on, I'm going to talk about the history, because like I said, I came up in a fundamental. A lot of people did come up in a fundamentalist household. You would never understand how a person like me would go and do a lot of research and the history of my religion. You do what I'm saying? So it's going to be an educational part to it too, when I talk about my religious studies and going back to the history of Christianity and all religions. Because I was kind of like Brother Shamako. I didn't join all these other religions, but in prison, I study. You got to remember, I'm in prison with people of all different belief systems, worldviews. So this is the first time I'm getting informed about all the aspects of human civilization, ideals, worldviews, philosophies, and stuff like that. So I started studying a lot of that stuff. You dig what I'm saying? So in one case, one part of my legacy of my book, I wanted to be where it challenges people, because a lot of people don't know their own history. It don't matter if it's the Black Panther Party. It don't matter if you're a Marxist, Leninist, Maoist. A lot of people don't know their history when it comes to that. But it's also religion too. A lot of people don't understand how religion came about in human civilization. So I'm going to be talking about that later on when I go into my studies. But one thing I also recognize, even when, and I hope I'm not giving this up, but even when I gave up Christianity and religion and all that stuff, I realized dealing with the communist movement, one of the mistakes that we made is that we started being antagonistic at times against religion, in a sense where we did see it could also be used as a positive force. You dig what I'm saying? Like me, I gravitate towards individuals that uphold like the tradition of Martin Luther King. If you ain't no Martin Luther King type of individual, and I ain't talking about I Have a Dream Martin Luther King, I'm talking about the one that talked about the nightmare in 98 and 97 and stuff before, right when he was assassinated. You know what I'm saying? Though it's a lot of Christians that out here that's mixed Marxism, Leninism, Maoism with Christianity, the Black liberation theology. You know what I'm saying? Those are people that we can unite with. You know what I'm saying? Because they see their faith is a way to transform our communities and fight for liberation from this system. Whereas a lot of the fascists, the evangelicals that we've been seeing, these Christo-fascists, they use it to maintain this system of oppression. You know what I'm saying? So we have to make a distinction between those that use their religion for liberation versus those that uphold this oppressive system and white supremacy. You know what I'm saying? Because we can actually go to a lot of these religions and see they have that dialectic to them. You know what I mean? They have that dialectical relationship to the movement and the class struggle, and we can't lump everybody in a category just because they're this, that they're against the people and stuff. That's not true. So that's another thing that I want people to get. Like when we finish this book and you see that even when I gave up Christianity, I started to realize like we got to unite with people across the board. We're not a monolithic community, and we have to have understanding that this struggle is going encompasses people from many demographics, different worldviews. But if we can unite around the issues that oppress our community and recognize at the end of the day we have to change this system, then we can unite no matter if we're an atheist or if we Christian. If we are atheist and or we are Muslim, or we are atheist and we are Buddhist or something like that. You know what I'm saying? So that's one thing I want a person to take away from this book when they read it. You know what I'm saying? Because it's really going to be informative on many different levels. But this is one of those subjects I felt necessary to point out because people only talk about the good influence religion had on people, but it's a lot of people like me out here. And since I'm not religious no more, and I came across a lot of people like me, we have this story, you know what I'm saying, that says different difference of how positive influence it is. Like you will not even understand my criminal mentality and why I was able to do the reckless stuff if you don't understand that sense of hopelessness and meaningless I got from religion. You know what I'm saying? Like you won't understand me as an individual. And it's a lot of people like that that had hopelessness. And it's a lot of people that's committed suicide that, based on this. And these are discussions we gotta have. We can't just talk about the positive all the time. We gotta talk about the people that we lose it to religion because they feel the same way I did. Like if I would have thought I could have went to heaven and committed suicide, I would have did that a long time ago. Like that's a real reality. You know what I'm saying? And it's a lot of people that feel like that. You know what I'm saying? So this is the aspect I wanted people to get out this chapter. But as you go on, you will see how I see this more complex. You know what I'm saying? It's not only negative. I see Black liberation theology, the people that's Marxists and stuff that's use religion, you know what I'm saying, as a means of liberation. Like we have to unite with those people. We can't divide ourselves against people that's fighting against the same system and stuff. So this is a very complex issue. This is not a black and white issue. This is a lot of gray areas that our generation have to take in consideration. in order for us to build up a united front against this system in a vote in the most meaningful, substantive way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Well said, well said. Comrade Lynn Mahoney is next, and then after her, Sister Veronica.
I can't believe it still says my name on there. It's Zombie. So this question is kind of for Kwame because of what you just brought up. And I'm not sure this is the right place for this question. Maybe if you're going to go farther into like religion and stuff like that, it might be a better time in there. But I interact with a lot of Black, Brown, and Indigenous people who feel like following Christianity and supporting Christianity is internalized colonization, because Christianity was the religion of the colonizers. And so how do you, you know, as a Caucasian person, I don't understand that what's the word I'm looking for? That conflict that could cause when you've been raised up in that church, and then someone looks at you and says, but that's the church of your enslavers. That was the church of your colonizers. So do how do you how is that handled? I mean,
That's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So for me, for the white church, completely different. Okay. I always felt like I dropped out of going to church. I mean, I was doing the foot stomping, and I am not going very early because I felt like it was nothing but a competition. It was like, ooh, look what she's wearing. Ooh, look at her hair. Girl, did you look in a mirror before you came to church today? You know, and it was just this, there was no religion about it. You know, it was like it was just different. And I did not grow up in a religious family because of that, you know. But I cannot imagine the conflict that must cause, you know. I don't know, I guess that's what yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's what kind of keeps jumping into my head is what a horrible conflict that is, because it was yeah. So
It's not
No,
recording.
you know what? Thank you,
can
thank you,
get some camera.
comrade,
'Cause I'm
for
about to
bringing
leave.
that up, because you hit the nail right on the head. For me, as a brown indigenous person with family roots from deep South America to even the northern continent, that I could literally trace indigenously, even to before the conquest. That's exactly how I feel. Like I feel like, you know how I feel. I almost feel dirty. Like, dang, because I know the history. I'm like, dang, my last name. It's funny on my driver's licenses and my work IDs. They usually just put Castillo because they can't hyphenate it, Villalobos Castillo.
mhm.
For old records, like if you really want to get into the history and you look up like old Catholic records, like if you're trying to, like, I don't know, do an ancestry.com or something like that, the Spaniards, they initiated this rule that when you got married in the Spanish church, you would have to join the name. So if you look at old Spanish documents, they would say something like Villalobos y Castillo, Villalobos and the letter Y, Castillo. And it showed that the two families of the Villalobos clan and the Castillo clan joined together. And then something happened that it just went to Villalobos Castillo. And then now oftentimes in quote unquote modern times, people just change the last name of whatever the husband's last name is. But that all came out because of the institution of the church. I've also done research indigenously, and most people that are indigenous just had names of the regions where they were from. That's it, not according to the person, but of where they're from. And then if you got married, you changed the name of either your spouse that you went to live in their region, or if you were a dude and you went to live with your spouse in the other region of your wife or whatever, your name was just singular and it was the region of where your spouse came from because now you're living there. There was none of this joining BS or whatever. So even in my research, I'm trying to decolonize, but thank you, Zombie, for two things. Thank you for educating me on your name. I apologize for that.
No,
And
that's
two,
okay.
thank you for being cognizant of that because you hit the nail right on the head. So much so that even now, as quote unquote a modern revolutionary, like I mentioned earlier in the call a couple years ago, my unit as Brown Berets did winter jacket a winter jacket drive for Brown Indigenous day laborers because here in Oregon it's always wet, it's always cold. We
Mhm.
were accepting gloves, we were accepting jackets, new and used, and I cannot tell you our biggest, to be honest, our two biggest donors were a group of sub-Saharan African Islamic sisters, wonderful people. My God, they felt like my people. I mean, they cooked for us. They were just so wonderful. They brought us into their homes, gave us brand new jackets, and I had the tags on them. And then a very large, I don't remember if it was like a Catholic or Lutheran, but I think it was like a non-denominational church, gave us a large donation and then even opened their facilities where we can have meetings and so forth. And I remember I was just honest and I was like, if you're one of those churches anti-gay, I'm out. I don't like capitalism. I don't like races, whatever. And that little pastor, I want to say priest, but that's what you call Catholic people. That little pastor was so humble. He was like, whatever you need, whatever you need. Jesus was a revolutionary too, whatever you need. And I was like, I gotta get you on something to hit you, man. Like, my people, what you did in my history, and he didn't. And so I thank you for recognizing that because I struggled with that, and I do think it's a good thing to keep onto the indigenous roots and so forth. But honestly, that's even to this day, that's what I struggle with. I was like, I'll never forget talking to my lieutenant, like, man, that's a nice donation. It's a big size, and they're all brand new jackets. But where it's coming from, should we take them? And you know what he told me is he said, do you think the people are going to care?
Right.
Are they going to care this is a brand new jacket from a Muslim sister? Are they going to care if this is a brand new jacket from a Catholic sister? And my lieutenant grounded me and he was like, if we're true servants of the people, we're true revolutionaries for the people, then we're Robin Hoods and we don't care where it comes from. Let's just take it. And I was like,
Right.
okay, that's how we roll.
Right.
But shout out to you
Well,
for
and it was a
recognizing
no,
that.
it was a very well, and and to be honest with you, Lobo, I as a white person would have never recognized that if it hadn't been brought to my attention by an indigenous. I got involved in a really great conversation on TikTok one night with an indigenous creator that I know, and a, a, an indigenous creator. And I believe we actually had an indigenous creator, a black creator, and a brown creator, all in the same room. And it was such an interesting conversation. And it was really just kind of eye-opening as to what a conflict that must be, you know. So I owe that to Blue Turtle for bringing that up to my attention. But thank you for letting me bring it up in here. I appreciate it.
Thank you, comrade. Thank you. And shout out to Blue Turtle. What a cool name. Sister Veronica, thank you for your patience. And you had your hand up, hermana.
Yes, thank you. So it's the timing of it is really good because it goes very well, Brother Lobo, with what you were just saying. So the whole concept of I thought about the quote by Che Guevara that the true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love. And so when we talk about things that are so very personal to us, such as spiritual or religious views. um how do we, how are we amongst the people, um talking about these different things that are affecting all of us regardless of religion or not. um how do we keep the conversation true and real while still being guided by great feelings of love? And so that has also been a great lesson to me. um, and a lot of it, learning from Brother Malcolm as well, that when he'd speak to people, would say, I'm not here to dissuade you from your religious views. That wasn't the agenda. um, we wanted to deal with the circumstances that were plaguing us. um, and so I think of it in terms of, I myself grew up as a Christian, and I'm a very analytical person, and I'm a why person, and I ask a lot of questions, and I just can't turn it off. Even when I want to turn it off, sometimes I just can't turn it off. But I think of, the Christian concept of agape love, this sort of supreme, unconditional, sacrificial love. The love that God has for us being unconditional and that sort of thing. At least that's what I was taught. Um, and so I think of agape love, and then, as I've embraced something that, is more revolutionary, and I think of revolutionary love, I've written down a few things about that. I I want love. I want better for me, for my children, for my grandchildren, for my people. But I also want that for you. I want that for your children. I want that for your grandchildren. I want that for your people. And so that was one of the things that drew me to the Rainbow Coalition. As Brother Kwame was saying, it transcends those things. And I think so many times, the topic of our spiritual or religious views, it gets to a point where it's so contentious, that it further divides us. And so, that has been something very dear and near to me, is how do I walk in that revolutionary love where I'm not disrespecting your beliefs and your choices and where you are, nor do I have an agenda to try to dissuade you one way or the other. We can have conversation. That's not to say that, I'm not going to tell you what my experience was with Christianity. And I'm also the type of person that will look at both the positives and the negatives. You can sit me in a room with KKK members, outright white supremacists, and I will learn a few things, not just one, but I will learn a few things, if anything, how I don't want to be. So I think, I wanted to make sure to bring that up, because I think when we have this conversation, sometimes it seems like, we're attacking, and I think we're all kind of mindful of, and have said, that's not what we're doing, but just keep things to historical facts, rather than just opinion. Thank you, brother.
Yeah, no, well said, hermana. Well said. Hermano Shamaco, are you ready? You have your hand up. If not, Brother Kwame is next.
Oh yes, man. I have to live with that the rest of the session, huh? Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah. So echo everything Sister Veronica just said 100%. I also threw these things in the chat. Actually, I really love that discussion. As a person who, because I'm a little different, right? Like when I say that I was, before I converted to Christianity, I was a shaman. Like I kind of had a Paul experience. That's the best way I can describe it. Like I hated Christianity. Like I am a Christianity hater. So anybody who comes to me as an indigenous or black or brown person who's like, how could you do that? I'm like, oh, Well, all right. So, I said in the chat, right? I put Eminem and question marks. Why would you put Eminem? It's a very simple reason. Because there was a point where Eminem was like considered like the quintessential definition of hip hop, right? And this seems to always happen, historically speaking, with movements that are generated by people of color, wherever somehow. So, we could say American now, but then it would have been Europeans, right? Wherever there is something to be gained by, for lack of better language, something with a soulful root, right? So, if we just look at the history of it, we can look at, say, the early church versus Constantinople, and it's not that much different than hip hop starting in the Bronx versus what happens when it gets to the record labels. It's the same. You know what I mean? It's the same. So, it's I don't know how much you know about hip hop, Zombie, but I'm not trying to bypass any arguments. But I think Kwame, you remember this. We talked about this in the movement, right? How Black Lives Matters gets co-opted, how Occupy gets things get co-opted. Co-option, it's what the rulers do. It's what they do. So it's a little tricky, right? Because certain movements get to certain points, and I think, oh man, I just thought about this. That's funny, because this is exactly what we were talking about with the funding issue, right? Like that's exactly what the nonprofit industrial complex is. It's the same machine designed to take things that are genuine, authentic, driven by the soul and the spirit and the heart, and turn them against themselves. So, I'm not gonna hold the heartlessness of Europe against Jesus. And I love Eminem. I don't want to pick on him. I think he's a dope artist. I don't think what happened with Eminem is Eminem's fault, and Dr. Dre to a certain extent was behind him. But I also think that for the reality of the situation is sometimes we have a vulnerability. It's reasonable, right? But sometimes we like our need to see ourselves in something is so strong, instead of just being okay with it being somebody else's. Like our need to covet a thing is so strong that we're willing to lie to ourselves to get what we want. And that makes it easy to manipulate history and the truth. So that's what I would say. Press.
No, well said, brother. I appreciate that. Well said. I love how, as comrades through revolutionary love, we can have these hard conversations, because being able to have hard conversations make revolutionary actions easier, right? And like sister, like Hermana Veronica said, some people, they hold things like identity and religion and stuff very contentious. And I love this conversation. Brother Kwame, please go ahead, sir. And we are almost near the 2-hour mark, just FYI.
All right. I appreciate everything that everyone said. Like I said, it's always a rich conversation. And I like how it's very principally conducted as comrades and stuff. I want to answer directly Zombie's question of how Black and Indigenous people, I can just speak for Black people on this topic. How do we deal with this cognitive dissonance? I see it's been dealt with healthy in two ways. One, on my way, it was the decolonialization process. You dig what I'm saying? Of religion and all that stuff for me. But then I see with a lot of and that separates in a couple of categories. But also I would say the Black liberation theology. I go back to that. It's a lot of Black people that took Christianity and blended it with revolutionary politics. And that was a healthy way that people use Christianity to fight for liberation. You dig what I'm saying? Both of those to me are healthy ways. My way that I went was the decolonialization way. And I see a lot of people in the Black community, they're doing that as well, but it comes in different forms. Like you have a lot of people going back to the comedic science You know what I mean? The ancient teachings of the Egyptians and stuff. And anyone that really knows the history of Christianity and religion, that's where it all came from in the first place. Like that's where the originators of these doctrines and stuff. You know what I'm saying? I didn't start to realize that until I started doing my studies of reading from the earliest Christians, and then finding out the earliest Christians, they were a lot they have more so in connection with paganism than they did with this modern day Orthodox Christianity that's taught in the West and stuff. And all of those people understood that they were teaching the same message, and it was more so like a, a universal message of finding that God person within inside yourself. You know what I'm saying? But this is not something that is uh, explained to a lot of people over here, because a lot of people over here really don't study their religion. You know what I mean? But you'll go to like Buddhists and uh people in the Hindu culture, and they actually already know that their religion even came from the same areas as well. So I say that's one of the and I'm about to order something. Give me a second. I'll let somebody else take up. I'm about to.
What are you ordering?
All right, brother
Rallies.
Shabako.
Rallies.
Go ahead, brother
Yeah,
Shabako.
pick
You
any
had
two
your hand up
singles,
anyways.
crispy fish sandwich.
Go ahead. Did you want to say something, brother Shabako? Because you still had your hand up.
Oh no, I need to take that down. My bad.
Oh no, you're quite all right. You're quite all right. You know what, comrades? Thank you guys for this.
I'm actually finished now. But
Go ahead.
just to conclude the last part I was saying though, but that's been a healthy way, because a lot of black people are starting to realize like this started with us and it was co-opted.
What size drink did you want?
Medium.
Medium.
It was co-opted and taken from us. You dig what I'm saying? So what we call Christianity today is really an African religion that was put a white face to it. You dig what I'm saying? And it was used for imperialist colonial reasons and stuff. You dig what I'm saying? And that right there is a way that I've been watching a lot of black people find a healthy resolution with their upbringing by going back to the roots of where it actually came from. You know what I'm saying? And taking it back to the spirituality that our African ancestors was teaching the world. You know what I mean? The ancient pagan societies, they all understood that they were talking the same message. But when the Romans took over, they co-opted it. They made it into a imperialist thing to conquer the world with. And they destroyed a lot of the civilizations that was actually understood this. You know what I'm saying? But we're refining this in the black community today, and a lot of people is starting to recognize that. So that's one of the healthy ways that people has been going about finding a resolution to answer Zombie's question, is going back to the origins of where it came from before the co-option. You know what I mean? But like I said, the last other thing is the Black liberation theology of those that don't go back to the origins, but use their Christianity faith to fight for liberation. So I think those are the two healthy ways I've witnessed people resolve a contradiction that came from colonizers and imperialists that oppressed our community with that religion, and found a resolution that was healthy to resolve that cognitive dissonance that we deal with.
You know what, you touched on something really interesting, brother Kwame. I think that's exactly it, is co-optiveness, because when you co-opt something, you exploit it. When you exploit something, you're using it to your advantage, right? And we all know how that can go. What's interesting is, if you look at a globe and you look at the western part of Africa, it really fits in with South America. And I remember talking to a couple of uncles that are musicians that we're trying to get together, that they may unfortunately have to play at a funeral or whatever. So we're trying to figure out how we can fly them, fly other instruments. And then y'all hear about what's going on in the news. And misdirecting luggage and having a backup plan in case they show up, but their guitars don't or whatever, right? And I remember one of my uncles was so proud. He wanted me to hear a song, and I was like, I can't understand half of it because your Spanish is so fast, but okay. And I remember he made a comment that todo es Africa, everything is Africa. And I remember because they are very ultra Christian, I was trying to be respectful, but I made some side comment. And then he told me, he said in Spanish, don't you know that the Garden of Eden is in Africa? So it's funny how certain brown Christians are realizing that. And like you said, some people are coming to that like a self-discovery, a self-identity. Um, yeah, it's very eye-opening. This has been a great conversation. This is one that I like talking about, especially because, especially now with what I do currently here in the Pacific Northwest with a lot of the local natives here, I've noticed that they do the same thing. Is sometimes you'll see like a church on the reservation, and I'm like, it's hardly ever used or whatever. Well, then you go on Sundays and it's packed, but yet they still have their longhouses and they still do sweats and so forth. And I forgot what documentary I saw specifically about that, but not in my region. And I remember one of the natives saying, one of our indigenous brethren saying, as a native man, I remember questioning that. And at the end of the day, my auntie, who happened to be a medicine woman, said, well, when you pass, do you want to know which one was right? Or do you want to just go? Or do you want to sit there and think about it? It's best to just have a couple of options. I thought that was very interesting because of, you know, some of the most oppressed people a lot of our Native American brethren have been, right? Um, and so Brother Hashid is dropping knowledge right here in the chat if y'all could read that. But we are now at the 2-hour mark. Thank you all for being here. Brother Kwame, do you want to say anything in closing, my good man?
Yes. Um, yeah, this was a great, very rich discussion. I think this is setting an example for a lot of other people dealing with these complex issues and how we should approach these in a principled way where we can speak about our own personal experiences, but also speak about like we have to maintain the unity and solidarity amongst the people to fight for the main uh, uh, oppressive system that we're all fighting against, and this capitalist imperialist system. Like we can do both at the same time. That's part of the dialectic contradictions and unity that goes into building a revolutionary movement. You dig what I'm saying? So teaching people how to have hard, complex conversations, but still maintain unity and rich dialogue that's gonna help us move this movement forward. I think this is something that's a good example that we're setting for other movements and the people in general. So I appreciate everybody's comments on here, everybody's everything that everyone's added to this rich discussion, and we got to keep this going. All power to the people.
Love, I'm gonna
All
call you.
power to the people.
All power to the people.
All power to the people. Thank you guys for being here. We'll do this again next Monday. If y'all disconnected, Brother Shamako could just stay on this line with me. But hey, thank you guys once again. All power to the people.
Black power.
Power to the people. Thank you.